You would hope that a motorcycle as peculiar as the two-wheel drive made in New Hampshire Rokon would have a backstory as entertaining as the bike itself. Well, I'm thrilled to tell you that it does. Welcome to episode 115 of the Lowdown radio show presented by advrider.com. I'm Neil Graham. Tom Blais grew up in Rhode Island, summered in New Hampshire, went to an Ivy League college, and became a banker. So far, so good. But then he got bored, which led, eventually, to him accidentally buying the Rokon Motorcycle Company. Tom talks about the ups and downs of American manufacturing and how the little company that could stands as the second longest continually produced motorcycle in America. We'll take that, Indian. So right off the bat, here's what I want to know, Tom. How did a guy who went to Dartmouth, who got into banking, take me back to the early 90s. What led you to get into this most unusual motorcycle company?
Well, I clearly didn't have a plan to get in the motorcycle business coming out of Dartmouth. I went into banking at State Street Bank in Boston. And one of my earliest memories in banking is I focused on international banking, exporting, and I was the bank's liaison with the Exim Bank. I didn't want to get pigeonholed and be a local banker like on Cape Cod or something like that. So I focused on international banking so I could cover more interesting topics, I think. So there was this company I heard about early on, Rokon, that was making an all-wheel drive motorcycle and was trying to export it overseas. And I thought that was interesting. And my career developed. I was there for 5 years and I became a vice president. And I had, along the way, met the owner of Rokon and four other businesses. He's based in Jaffrey, New Hampshire. His name was Robert Corpy, and he was an interesting entrepreneur. And as my career developed, I made plans to leave banking because it was getting a little boring. And I started scouting out my customers to see if there might be job opportunities. And, I was always fascinated with New Hampshire. As a young kid, I had gone to summer camp in New Hampshire.
Where were you born?
I was born in Rhode Island.
Rhode Island.
Yeah. And the pediatrician that my mother took me to was an owner of a summer camp in New Hampshire. And so when I was I was 7 years old, my mother sent me away to camp for a month. And I ended up staying 2 at 7 because I loved it so much, the adventure of it, hiking, canoeing, hiking the White Mountains, Mount Washington, the Presidential Range.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place. Yeah.
Yeah, canoeing the Androscoggin. Eventually, I multiple times canoed the Allagash and East Branch of the Penobscot, and I climbed every 4,000-foot mountain. Eventually, as I went along in camp, I became a counselor in training, and then eventually a counselor, and then eventually I was a trip leader. So I would get to pick these incredible trips I could lead these kids through all around New England. And I just loved that, being outside and camping and that kind of thing. So being a kid from Rhode Island, we didn't really have that, but I went through the camp and through this outlet, I just became to love New Hampshire. So when I was looking around in the bank with my clients to see where I would like to end up and live and really raise a family, I'm a young guy, I'm in my early 30s. I was always had an affinity towards New Hampshire. So then I had met Robert Corpy.
And was Robert Corpy, was he the gentleman who founded Rokon?
No. The Rokon was founded in 1958 by, first of all, Rokon was invented by Charlie Fine, who was just an inventor, tinkerer in Sylmar, California. And he didn't have a lot of capital, but he came up with a concept and he built the original trail breaker.
Right.
He needed capital backing and he got that from JB Nethercutt, who, JB Nethercutt was, the developer of, believe it or not, a cosmetics line, a very successful company in California. And JB Nethercutt there's a museum in California of all his cars, and, he had incredible car collections, a very famous car collection in California to this day. And, he did the backing, and one of the reasons he did the backing for the early Rokons was because he had these sons who were gonna be drafted into the Vietnam War. This is all anecdotal, and I don't claim it to be exact, but,
You know what?
uh
A good story doesn't even have to cling that closely to the truth, but you're
yeah,
on a
I
roll
but
here,
th
so
this
keep
this is
going.
this is what I heard, and I think it's pretty much true. Um, if his sons were working in a business that was related to supplying equipment for the war effort,
They
then
dodged the draft.
they would be able to not have to get drafted. So, and indeed, Rokon's, the early purchasers, uh, were mostly hunters, but became a military vehicle. And I have actually talked to, veterans who served in Vietnam who used Rokons. They would tow out an M60 machine gun. They would, tow out helicopters to the flight line. This little bike, this little workhorse weighing 185 pounds, all-wheel drive, just had this incredible leverage to tow up to 2,000 pounds. It was quite amazing as a vehicle that something that small could do that much work. And,
It
I
doesn't quite seem possible looking at it, does it?
I know it doesn't. It always So when you hear these stories, and I'm a young guy at the bank, and I'm hearing about these stories from Corby and, others, and I do my research, it's kind of a fascinating history. So,
Mm.
um, but I really thought Bob was a fascinating guy because he was such a great entrepreneur. If he didn't have a college education, he was just unlike me completely, but he had this certain, energy, which was intoxicating, really, to be able to, launch a business from nothing. He had been in the car business. He was a Chrysler Plymouth dealer with his brother in Keene, New Hampshire. And then he just had this energy to learn about finance. He would go to training classes that Chrysler would have to teach people about finance. And he just was a blue collar, learn it on your own kind of guy who just had infectious energy to sell things. And so he would sell cars. Then he got into the fireworks business by accident. He actually had one of the largest fireworks companies that existed in New England at that time. They would shoot fireworks for towns and municipalities for typically the 4th of July or New Year's.
Yeah.
So this was a Class B license, and that was a very profitable business for him. And then he had some real estate, uh, interests, and he did some other little products like that he would make, things like fire starters. He was just a crafty character. Anyway, and he kinda adopted Rokon, and so he, took it over at a difficult point in his history. So, as I said from the beginning, Charlie Fiennes invented it. JB Nethercutt put the capital in to get his son's job, but quickly, and that was in early late, I would call it 1958, 59. But by 1963, Nethercutt didn't want Rokon anymore, and he sold it to his largest dealer in Vermont, to a character named Orla Larson. And Orla, who I met, uh, was just an int just a very motivating, gregarious guy. He didn't just do Rokon, he did so many things in terms of creativity. You just love talking to guys like this, and so Orla,
They sound like characters from a John Updike novel or something.
it goes on and on, but all the owners are like this too. So if they're listening to this, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about because they're all a little crazy in their own way, and they all have stories. But so
So
Orla,
you seem the anomaly, the guy that went to Dartmouth and went into bank. Your mother must have hated this, you buying this crazy company, but we'll get there in a second.
Are you kidding me? Everyone was concerned. You go to tough school and you're supposed to go to Wall Street and make a fortune and, there's expectations, blah, blah. But I don't know. I kinda went a slightly different path because, honestly, when I started Rokon, it was not doing well, and it was very small, and I had 2 young children, and,
And this
I
no, this is the early '90s, but this Ola
yeah.
character, let's jump back to
I'll
him.
finish with
Finish
Orla
that part,
first.
and then I wanna get
Or
into
or
your
or Orla was in Vermont. He was, near Mount Snow. It's a ski area, and he owned a restaurant, at the base of Mount Snow called On the Rocks. So Rokon wasn't called Rokon in the beginning, it was called, called Nethercut Industries first. So Nethercut sells it to Orla, and he renames it Rokon. He pronounced it Rokon, Rokon, and he took the letters from his restaurant, On the Rocks, flipped them all around to come up with Rokon.
oh, I get it. Now
Okay,
now I know.
okay. Now, when I got involved, so Orla, I met him many years after I owned Rokon at they have these things called romps where these Rokon meetups. Owners create these things,
The Rokon Romp, okay.
and there was one called the Hillbilly Romp in West Virginia. So I got invited. Orla got invited. This is a number of years ago, um, and so I drove down there with a Rokon on the back of my SUV and into this holla. I didn't even know what a holla was.
Yeah, yeah.
These hollows are high wall canyons where families lived, and they would, you know, be pretty much unto themselves, and then they would have to walk out of the hollow to the road that would cross in front, and that's how kids would walk out to the road to get the school bus. But they pretty much lived in these deep hollows that you didn't see a house because it was way back in the hollow. So, and then these high walls around the hollow protected it, and so we go into the hollow, and it's perfect for Rokon riding because it's straight up, and these guys had these trails straight up the hollow, and that was my introduction. I had to go ride a 6% grade right up to the top of the hollow. I was all in, I was ready to do that. That's how I was in those days. I'd do anything for Rokon. So, and then I'm hanging out, and they've got moonshine, and I'm sitting around, and they keep asking me questions. Why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? What's going on with this? What's going on? I was all night long. We were sitting out on picnic tables. It was like I was so exhausted. I go to bed in my little tent that I had brought, and the next morning, some characters at the tent at 6 a.m. with coffee say, "Tom, I have a few more questions." That's how it was. That's how it was at the romp. But of course, well, Orla was there, and there's some famous pictures of Orla and I together, but other people too. There were a bunch of characters, not just me, our host. It goes on and on. They were a lot of people are still around today that showed up for that romp, but there were other romps too. So, um, I really,
Well,
I enjoy.
take me back to where when you decided to take the plunge, because as you said, you went to a proper school, you had a proper education, you were on the way. And those who
So,
and then, what was the moment when you said, "Okay, I'm gonna quit that and do this," which must have seemed at the time like pure madness.
well, when I left the bank, I didn't go directly to work for Corby. He wanted me then. It was 1987, and I had a more lucrative opportunity that I took with a group in Newton, Massachusetts. And I actually what became the president of a company doing 401k plans, a small when 401k was just starting, and we were doing small enrollments, like companies of 300 people or less. So we wrote software to do this, and I sold a bunch of my bank clients on this, and it was good for a year. But after the year, I was making good money, I didn't have stock in the company and, it was amicable, but they wanted me to move out because they wanted to save money. And so, I went back to Bob and he hired me, but I went into a maelstrom. It was the real estate crisis of 1989, 90. So I showed up there June 1st, 1988, and I'm now working for Rokon, but I'm working for all the companies that he had.
Mm.
And, Bob is under intense financial pressure. And anyway, I became a CFO. He got converted to, eventually in about a 2 years to, Chapter 11, and then a Chapter 7 liquidation. So he's being liquidated. There's nothing we could do. It already had started because the banks were failing. Amoskeag Bank failed. Bank East failed. It was a lot of pressure on every entrepreneur in New England at this time. Not just Bob, it was across the board. He didn't really do anything wrong. It's just there was intense pressure to liquidate loans.
Right.
And so, the bankruptcy trustee, I was left with no income, obviously. I'm not making anything at this point. I'm dwelling whether I'm gonna go back to the bank with my hat in my hand and beg for a job. And, I'm living in Jaffrey, uh, with these 2 small kids, and I just had this idea that I'd approach the trustee, and because nothing was starting on Rokon. Rokon was sitting, um, it was had been moved out of its building, but all the equipment and all the inventory were sitting in 5 tractor trailers. So I had this idea to stimulate the bidding. I went to the trustee and I bid, a relatively low amount. I bid on the stock, which you're not supposed to do. You're supposed to bid on the assets, but knowing what the liabilities were and how they hadn't really been paid much, I figured I could get the thing started for very low money. So I put a bid in.
And you had no intention of owning it, correct?
No,
You just
no,
wanted to stimulate
I,
interest.
I was trying to stimulate interest and hopefully become the CFO again, like my previous job. That I was very naive. I'm 33. I don't know. Trust me. I did. I
I
don't
was
know.
I was 33 once upon a
And
time.
anyway, so no one else bids. It gets advertised all over New England. Every law firm knew about it, but everything else was being foreclosed on. It's hard to believe real estate was so worthless then. The Union Leader, which is the main paper in New Hampshire, was so thick with advertisements for foreclosures on homes. I can't even describe how thick the paper was.
Right.
Just it was a bad time. Unlike today where real estate is so valuable, but then, it was a bad time because of these banks failing and because of all that. Even the government started a company and an entity in Texas called the RTC to help, liquidate these banks. So, um, anyway, no one bids. The trustee says I win it. So I said, "Oh my god." And now, so I I give him my money and I own it. And suddenly I get served papers at the house over and over that I owe in this substantial debt.
Oh,
So now I got to go to court, and answer to all these companies that Rokon owed money to. So I go to court. I don't bring a lawyer. I go to court. I dress up in my best suit. And I sit in the back row because the way the court works, they have criminals, they have, drug people, all these horrible cases, and then the business cases are the last ones to be heard.
because 'cause they're
It's
the
J
least interesting.
it's Jaffrey Peterborough District Court, you know?
Right, right.
And the judges, some clerk calls out, it'd be Diamond Chain versus Rokon International, uh and who's here to represent Rokon? And I would go to the front of the court and say, "It's me, Judge." And he'd say, "Okay, how do you plead?" "Well, Judge, we owe that $5,000 to Diamond Chain, but, oh," he said, "Okay. Well, you need to make an arrangement. What can you afford?" "Your Honor, we're not really operating right now, but I can afford $25 a month." And he would say, "Make sure you make the payments." So, 25 bucks a month. So then I came back 15 times like that, like
For all
over
these
and
for various
over.
suppliers.
And I go back to the court over and over, and the judge said, "Oh, you got to know me." He said, "Make sure you make the payments." So I make the payments for a few months, and then I would settle the debt for like $300 4 or 5 months later when I, got the company started to going a little bit. Eventually, I realized that Jaffrey wasn't the best place for the company, so I had a lot of contacts on the seacoast near Portsmouth, so I moved the company to Portsmouth, and, there was a guy, who had just put up a spec building behind Market Basket on Lafayette Road in Portsmouth, and it was a pretty substantial steel structure, but no tenants. Brand new, but again, it's this real estate crisis. No one's renting anything, and he offers me a 5-year lease with the first 4 months free. So I think, "Great. Well, if we go bankrupt in the first 4 months, I haven't lost any rent money." So I take this lease and and I bring everything to the building. I get some labor to help me set it up. And then I get people who moonlight after, like, they come in at 4 o'clock and work till 10 o'clock building Rokons because I couldn't afford regular employees at the beginning. Eventually, I hired most of these guys to work for me at once I start because I would spend the whole day working on trying to get orders and selling parts and doing whatever I could to create revenue and,
And
earning.
did you have a dealer network at this point? Did it still
No,
exist?
no, there were dealers that had been dealers, and I reignited them. I would, come with new ones. I would advertise in things like Field& and Stream. Everyone who remembers Rokon remember these little ads in the back of Field& and Stream and North American Hunter. I would take the tiniest little ad in the back of the paper, and we'd have this little ad, or I also put it in commercial news overseas. Commercial news was a US government publication that I
Mhm.
was familiar with because of my exporting background, and I advertised in commercial news, and then one day I got this incredible order from Taiwan for, like, a container, which was like 20 Rokons, and, and they wired me the money. I think it was I don't know. I can't really remember. I think it was like $300,000. They wired me this money in advance, and I thought I'd hit the lottery. Now I have capital I can invest back in Rokon, which I did. I invested every dollar back in Rokon, better parts. I learned how to buy better parts. I issues Going cheap has never really worked for Rokon. I always tried to buy from New England, from New Hampshire, from New England, from the United States, and if I have to, at the last resort, go overseas. I've always kept to that philosophy. Try to be truly American.
Mhm.
America has the best quality, bar nowhere else in the world, and I stick to that to this day. So anyway, we, we started building Rokons at,
So at this
yes.
point, how many are you in the first year, how many bikes did you sell?
Well, when I bought the company, it probably had a dozen or so bikes that I used very strategically to sell. But the first year, honestly, was very limited revenue. I couldn't even pay myself.
Just
It
a
was
handful
real
just a handful.
it was humbling.
Yeah.
It was so humbling that, um, it it just was just horrible, in terms of having to deal. But I don't wanna tell you any too many more anecdotal stories 'cause well, let me say, my family was very disappointed in me, and, they had married a Tuck graduate, and I can't make a decent salary, and, it was but every day got better. I can't tell you, it was intoxicating. From at Tuck school, it was just amazing experience. We worked in these teams, um in the second year of business school, you'd have a guy run sales, you'd have a guy run marketing, you'd have a guy run production, you'd have a guy run administration, whatever. And we worked against other teams all set up on a business school problem to competing.
Yeah.
And it when I got to doing this with Rokon, even though I was making no money, I felt like I was driving a Maserati and I had all the controls. I felt so powerful. even though it was only every day got a little better, so I kept going and going, and, I'm getting a lot of feedback from these crazy Rokon owners, you know about different things we could do and different ideas and how to improve things. And I felt like I was a giant mirror. I would just reflect back at them exactly what they were telling me, try to really give them what they wanted in terms
Right.
of the style of the bike, the quality of the bike, whether they wanted it quieter, front suspension, what accessories, over and over. I just dug into it slowly and
I mean, the
reinvested the money I had.
the history of most brands is that, and I think almost every company that makes anything does this, is where you start to have a degree of success, and then you start looking elsewhere into different kinds of motorcycles. Now, I know Rokon in the '70s, if I'm not right, sort of made a more conventional by Rokon standards, sort of enduro and almost flat track style bike. I think it had a Sachs two-stroke. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, you were right. So what happened then was, so Orla sells out to that group. It was led by an investor group by this fairly wealthy guy named Nick Harris. Now, not a lot's been said about Nick Harris, but Nick Harris invested a lot of money in Rokon, and he moved the company to Emerald Street in Keene, New Hampshire, and they had a significant factory, and they produced a lot of the Mark III, Mark IV trail breakers. Orla did his work, but these guys are the ones who really started producing a lot of Rokons. And then he had a group within his group that wanted to build, racing bikes, enduros like the RT 340. And they had a great engineer who worked for me too, a guy named Mark Hamilton, who was just brilliant, great man, calm, thoughtful, old school in terms of he hand wrote the drawings for every part. If you look, I have all these drawings that he wrote, that he drew, and they're like today everything is CAD CAM. It's hard to describe how a man can sit there and free draw incredible, beautiful parts.
Yeah.
It's truly artwork. Mark Hamilton was an artist, but he was a true engineer in that he could see you could give him an idea. I need the bike to do this, and he could go figure out the engineering of it and how that might work. And I'm not saying it was always perfect, but he could give you a drawing, and then you could take it to what I call the Yankee engineers, the actual guys that worked for me who could bend tool, bend bend steel,
Right.
and we would build test things. And, like, we got a patent on all-wheel drive, front suspension and an all-wheel drive design. I can't tell you how many iterations that went through. I think it must have gone through 9, 10 iterations before we were really happy with where it is today, where now we know it works perfectly.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, some of those iterations weren't as good.
The Lowdown Radio Show is presented by advrider.com. Become a site supporter and receive our biannual magazine. advrider.com. What I find interesting about Rokon is that you've come up with this sort of template that works, and you've resisted the temptation, or maybe it's not a temptation, tell me, to go off into other categories and other sorts of motorcycles or any kind of product. I mean, why have you stuck to this thing that just seems to work for you?
It's because of these crazy Rokon customers. I love them. Okay. I love them. They sometimes they love me back, but a lot of times they'll criticize me. They'll tear me apart, but I love it all. I love
It
the
sounds
process.
like a dysfunctional family, like
I
which
love
every
the
family
process.
is.
I love the process. What customer ever bought something and didn't say he was overcharged for anything? It could be a book. It could be anything. You put a piece of paper down. You put these glasses. Everybody thinks they got ripped off, but, at the end of the day, I always try to give them true value, and I'm proud of the fact uh, that almost I would say just about every Rokon that was ever built by Rokon, including the ones prior to me, they're still running today. that means something to me. That means something to me, okay? Because we're about, building a quality piece of equipment, old school, American, and I believe in that.
'Cause it seems like a very old-fashioned business model, doesn't it?
I don't know. I don't know if it's old-fashioned or not. I just think it's an honest approach to the way life should be for all products, to be honest with you. I mean, I
Yeah,
think we should bring value to customers. It's about value added and standing behind your product. Obviously, I get nervous. We're selling a moving product. I don't want anyone to get injured. And for the most part, I don't know of any, real serious injuries, knock on wood. I mean,
right.
one of the things I resisted was making the bike go faster. Speed and weight are your enemy off-road. You, honestly, going slower and being able to tackle difficult terrain means you gotta have sure-footed, go slow workhorse, um, capabilities, and that's what I try to make the bike be.
So take me through, once you in the early '90s, you take over the company, you finally get on your feet, and once things you get this big order from Taiwan, reinvest the money. I mean, take me through the next bunch of years. I mean, just getting the business on the feet. What's the process for you of building it into a solid business?
Well, Rokon and most businesses fail with lack of focus on cash flow, and so I had been trained at State Street by this incredible legend there, a guy named that people never heard of, named Howard Fairweather, who, was the chief credit officer at State Street Bank. He was something. He could see risk in the most minuscule things. He opened my eyes to risks, to be,
Sounds like my mother.
I mean, Y I would argue with him. I was living in New Hampshire in those early days, and he lived in Newburyport, and when his car needed service, he'd bum a ride for me. He's a senior vice president, he's a very senior guy. I'm a lowly nobody loan officer. Maybe I was even in the training program before that, so he knew me from the beginning. And he'd bum a ride, and he'd know I lived in New Hampshire, so I'd drop him off in Newbury, and then the whole ride, he'd be talking about all these crazy risks and this and that. I learned a lot from him. So you have to be really careful with your financial situation in a small company. And, cash is king, of course, everybody knows that, but to manage cash, to make sure you have enough money to pay your vendors. Now, I paid every vendor since I started, 100%. I don't never let anybody down. I paid everybody. And
Right.
I made sure I didn't overorder, but I made sure I sometimes you have to aggressively order because, for some of the things we buy, you can't buy 10, you gotta buy 500. So, it's like you're taking a stake. Am I gonna really sell 500? Am I gonna sell 1,000? And, when you're not selling a lot of bikes, you gotta take these risks. And I believed in Rokon for the long haul. I always believed in it, and I fought for it.
Mm.
I still fight for it, but now I'm throttling back. My son's involved, and he's just a wonder. He's introduced so many new systems I could never have thought of to make the company run even more efficiently. So, I'm really proud that he's working with me, and that's the future for Rokon. Now, business changes, designs change. Eventually, maybe we've changed the motor 3 times. Maybe we'll change it to electric. We're looking at it. But, gas is a better choice right now because so many people have looked at this, but gasoline gives you a lot more, um, power for the pound and longevity. Batteries, are notorious for not lasting very long. So it's for what we do for off-road, for military, for off-road training, hunting, you need reliability. So it's still gas today.
The Lowdown Radio Show is presented by advrider.com. Just one last question about the business, and then we'll take a few minutes and just talk about the bike itself.
Sure.
Um, But how are you affected by no, is it I don't wanna be you're a New Englander, and I don't wanna ask you inappropriate questions, but is it safe to say you sell motorcycles in the hundreds
Oh, yeah.
per
Oh,
annum?
yeah. Oh, yeah. You know,
Okay.
I don't wanna divulge it, but definitely in the hundreds.
In the hundreds,
That's what
not
makes the not the thousands, but
right.
the hundreds. I mean, we started in a lease facility in Portsmouth, then we were the first tenant at Pease. We doubled our space when we moved to Pease, which was, a former military base, which still is a National Guard base, but now they opened up a lot of the buildings, and we were, with the assistance of the New Hampshire of the state of New Hampshire, specifically George Ball, who rehabbed a building off the flight line, and we became literally the first tenant at Pease. I'll always thank that gentleman,
Mm.
and the state of New Hampshire. They gave us that lease, uh, um, and that building was doubled our space, and we were next door, to a powder coat operation, which was very efficient. Uh, that really helped the company grow quite a bit, and then we were there for many years, and then when Pease became too successful, um, and they really tried to double our rent, and I get it. They were a lot of high tech companies were coming in. Now it's a vibrant hub for the seacoast of New Hampshire. There's probably 5,000 people working there. But
Wow.
when we and we I looked at the building a building there, but ultimately I lucked out and bought this building in Rochester. Now, you would I never thought in a million years I would go to Rochester, but that was a brilliant move because that's where the workforce is. And, the workforce for, like, the naval shipyard in our region is busing people from Rochester. They're lucky to get them. And so, there aren't people in Portsmouth who would work at a Rokon today. It's a different kind of vibe there.
And
And
how many employees do you have at present?
we've
Roundabout?
had right now, we're running about 8 to 10, and
Mhm.
that's kind of where we've been as high as 15. Um, we're a small manufacturer, but we've made things so efficient as to what our people can do. And but we do a lot there. We do all the welding. We do all the, welding of the frame, welding of the wheels. We do all the painting, all the sandblasting, all of it.
Let me ask you, 2 major financial events occurred within the last 25 years, last 20 years. How did the, financial crisis of 2008, 2009, and then the pandemic, how did they affect you? You're laughing now, you weren't then.
I was I always found these things this is like business school games to me, you
Right.
know? I mean, I studied with a group. First of all, I was lucky even to get into Tuck School. I got in off the wait list. That means you were the last guy to get picked. Okay. I was going to go to a different business school, but I was thrilled, obviously, with my New Hampshire background to get picked. I mean, I remember going to Tuck School and I didn't have housing. I could have cared less. I drove over there and if school was going to start in 2 weeks. I didn't have housing. I went into the off campus housing office. I was in such a good mood, and, I see this guy all sullen, and he didn't know what he was gonna do. He had been at Dartmouth for 4 years, and now he's gonna go to the, Thayer School of Engineering, and I walked up to him, and he looked all unhappy. I said, I assume you don't have housing." He says, "No." I said, "Well, let's team up. Let's team up and figure this out." So we got this house. I was 30 minutes away and it was not winterized. And, you know, we took a 90-day lease. I say we got housing. We got the first 90 days covered. I'm not afraid of risk. So we figured that out. We figured out talk then I went, so we're gonna figure out 2008. What happened was I was at a trade show. Oh, I went to this trade show for 25 years at the SHOT Show in Las Vegas. It's a big hunting show. It still goes on today. Um, and it was you'd be standing in your booth for 4 days or 3 days, I can't remember. I guess it was 4 days. very grueling because 'cause you're on your feet the whole time, and you're talking to literally thousands of people, and people would buy Rokons right then and there, or they would, wanna become dealers, whatever. So I get this message. Now, I've been doing a lot of dealer floor planning for my dealers and, using GE, General Electric Finance at that point, and, they called me up and said, "We're pulling all the lines in all your dealers." Okay? Uh, I go, "Whoa, okay. What does that mean?" Well, under the agreements I signed with them, I'm responsible to immediately or within a certain time frame, I don't not a very long time frame, within 30 days, I've got to take ownership of these bikes from wherever they sit and pay GE back. Now that's an eye opener. Okay, so I start totaling up that little debt and then the logistics of these bikes. Some are in Washington, some are in Montana.
So you'd have to repatriate these machines.
Yeah, well, I get on, yeah, but I was really good at figuring that out. So what I would do is get on the phone, call various people, and pound the phone, and I would get those bikes sold at some price. Just get the money, give it to GE, and move on. Okay, that was one of my things. So when I was very young, I went to my mother and I said, "I need a job. I'm 15 years old, and I really want to work at the International House of Pancakes because I hear that you can go there and they're gonna give you good tips." And she said, "No, no, you can't have that job." So I said, I don't know why she wouldn't let me get that job. I guess I was too young, 15, you had to be 16. So she goes to this place, this guy that owned this clothing store, and, where she had bought all the clothes for me and my brothers, and he hires me to run the boys department on commission. That's when I learned about people and sales. I learned a lot about how to interact and with decision makers, mostly the mothers, and how to, what their kids were gonna wear, how much they were gonna buy, color coordination, all this stuff. But I learned a lot about sales early at 15, 16. I mean, I wanted to play soccer, but, I didn't have time. I had to make money so I could get a car. I mean, how else are you gonna date girls if you don't have a car? And I didn't have any money. So and we weren't wealthy, so I sold clothes, and that helped me a lot learn about people. It helped me learn a lot about sales early on, and I think those techniques have helped me a lot. Remember, it's not about giving people a line, it's about finding value for them, what really is gonna matter to them, and cut to the chase. Not don't walk around it, give them a lot of pie in the sky stuff. You gotta cut to the heart of their problem, that you're filling a need somewhere in their life, even with a Rokon. And
Right.
if it doesn't fit, stop. Don't sell them something they don't need, sell them something they need. So that was always been my premise, so find
What
the
about
people find the people that have the need.
and then, the pandemic? I know how it's affected traditional
The
motorcycle
the
manufacturers. Everything went crazy, and then there's been this horrible hangover period.
the
Some brands
pandemic
like
was
KTM, you nearly drowned because of it. How about you? What was your experience?
Pandemic was phenomenal. I mean, you couldn't build Rokons fast enough. Uh, the PPP, we got PPP money. There was money coming at us left and right, but w it knowing being very conservative and wanting to reinvest the money in the company, I was extremely cautious because, while it's great while it's going, and it was hard to get parts, you had to, pull a rabbit out of your hat to get everything, and hard to get the labor up to speed to build all the bikes we needed. Um, and not wanting to cut corners because I know what that's like when take chances and take risks on quality because you get headaches on headaches on headache phone calls, and you don't want to be in that box either. So we built our bikes. My son was involved. My team was involved, and they came up with some very interesting and fascinating techniques to ramp us up. I give them so much credit. they really were the backbone of what was going on during the pandemic, particularly my son.
So that you
So
so in a nutshell, they were able to find more efficient ways to build without sacrificing quality?
efficient ways, efficient everything. Um, and then all of a sudden I could see it was gonna stop. I mean, it like hit a wall. And, we'd ramped up with extra people and we had to make some hard decisions um, on certain employees who were at the margin and who weren't really producing. And, we had to like, now we didn't suddenly, it went from all these orders to, quiet time and like, whoa. And it was fast and you had to adjust your marketing. Like during the ramp up, we weren't even marketing because you didn't have to do anything. Orders were coming in. And now you have to come back and retell your story. And you got to focus in again on where your product really fills a need, who really needs it, and how to make that message come across. So we did that, and I give my son the credit again. We stopped the thing on a dime, and he dove into marketing, and we flipped the website, we flipped our processes. He built an online store, which is to this day phenomenal. I can't even tell you, and it wasn't easy. There was a lot of hiccups, but it yeah, we transitioned through that too, and it wasn't easy, but, we were careful, and now today I just feel like we've come out with some new products like this new Rokon Fire Ranger, which is an unbelievable rescue setup with a Stokes litter on the back, and we're selling that to municipalities and, um, uh, parks, uh, state parks, city parks.
Well,
There's a
that's
lot of mountain biking going on in the country, and we're the de facto rescue vehicle for mountain biking, I think.
yes. I mean, take us through for those of us who haven't, myself included, and I would assume most of our listeners and viewers have not ridden a Rokon. I mean, what are
Well,
they like? There's a small 208 cc four-stroke engine, CVT transmission. I mean, they sound like you just hop on and go, and of course the two-wheel drive, with a what I looks like to me like an Earl's fork sort of arrangement for front suspension. Um, what are they like to ride compared to a
so
traditional dirt bike?
I I can only give you my personal experience because, uh, the first time I rode one, um, was in the '80s. Like, and that probably was right after I got hired by Corby, and now understand, I've never ridden a motorcycle. I've ridden a bicycle, but never a motorcycle, and I got on a Rokon. It just felt intuitive. It was simple. It's point and go. It maintains balance at low speeds. There's no shifting. Yes, there's a three-speed transmission, but you have to stop, come to a complete stop, and set it in a range. And 95% of the time, you're gonna ride it in a second, which is 0 to 22.
Mi
So it
miles
only
miles per hour.
22 miles per hour.
Right.
Yeah. So I set it in second, and we're in, uh, Corby had a farm and a big farm, and I'm riding it around. I go, wow, this thing is easy. And it was like on a bike, but you don't have to pedal, and it's got a lot of low end power. It's very stable. And eventually I got more comfortable. He had a lot of stone walls. You could drive right over the stone wall. I'm not saying fast, but you get up there, get the bike up on an angle on the stone wall, put your feet out, uh, lift, tip the bike over the other side, sit back down, go right over. It was amazing. Go over a log like this. You can climb. You can climb a steep hill. You learn to do it. Uh, you know, do switchbacks up trails because you without fear of rollover. I mean,
And they're very light too, aren't they?
very light. That was the key. Not to have it too heavy, but have a lot of low end. And
Because they're like sub 200 pounds, are they not?
right. The original ones were 185. The one today is 218 because we had to four-stroke engines made it slightly heavier,
Right.
and the front suspension slightly heavier. But I try to keep it down. I always don't want to have the weight too high. Um, but those it was worth the 185, this extra pounds to go to 218 because of these improvements, I think. Anyway, I as I said, wasn't a great rider. I mean, there's so many people I've met that ride Rokons better than me, but I've always been in spots where I have to be the de facto, rider. So, one time I brought one of my employees to, believe it or not, back up to, Killington, and we were gonna be in a movie. And we're in this movie called, Icebreaker. It stars Stacy Keach and John James and, Sean Austin, who he played Rudy in the movie Rudy. And you don't meet any of these people. You're just doing your little thing. So what it was is we're gonna take a Rokon in 2 feet of snow, and we're gonna blow up the power plant, which is at the base of Killington. So they have it all set up, and I bring one of my employees who I thought was gonna, ride the bike, but he didn't fit into the costume. So, I mean, so I have to wear the costume, I'm not as tall as he was, and I brought him because I knew he was a better rider than me, but now I gotta ride to 2 feet of snow, which I did, and go in there, and I'm terrorist number 2 in that movie on the credits, so,
Oh, that's perfect.
yeah.
And so
That
and
was
so just in terms of the engineering, I mean, how do you get the power to the front wheel? I saw an illustration, it looked like there's sort of a drive shaft that comes up, essentially what would be the top tube of the frame, and then goes into the headstock. Is that sort of it?
Correct. So there's a 3-speed transmission in the back of the bike with a drive shaft that goes to the forward portion of the bike through a center tube, but gets past the handlebar with a flexible universal joint and to a 90-degree gearbox on the front to drive the chain on the opposite side. But the trick to the whole thing is the sprag type clutch, which sits on the drive shaft, which disengages power to the front on corners, but re-engages automatically as soon as you straighten out.
Oh, I
That
see. Yeah, yeah.
that's the key to it. And then, uh, you know, uh, I it's ingenious. Charlie Fane, basically, it wasn't perfected even when Charlie did it. It kept breaking, and so a lot of improvements were made to it over time. It's pretty bulletproof today.
And how do you do it with the chain drive to the front wheel? Because you have front suspension, how do you deal with issues of varying chain tension?
Well, we have the way we do it with the vertical and the horizontal chain, that's at a fixed point. So we don't flex there, so to speak. We flex on the, like you said, the Earl's Fork thing. So that's how Mark Hamilton ingeniously came up with that mostly.
Right,
And he came up with it and he drew it, but it didn't work. And then, as I said, a lot of Yankee engineering,
right.
um, characters that worked for me through the years, and you have to be patient with these things. You build prototype after prototype after prototype, and you don't rush it to market because if you do, you'll get, a lot of warranty issues and a lot of complaints. So we were very cautious about bringing that to market, and we brought it to market very slowly. And now today, you know, it's de facto everyday stuff now. So
Who is buying Rokons and what are they using them for? You talked about single track mountain biking. Obviously, I'm a mountain biker, so I know a lot of the places I go, you couldn't get a double track vehicle. You couldn't get an ATV or a side by side,
exactly.
UTV, I guess they're called. So I guess that's more. And you talked about the Fire Ranger, but give me a sense of who's using. What are they buying them, and what are they using them for?
There's 5 markets. First is recreation, and recreation primarily big game hunting, elk hunting at high altitude in Idaho. All elk are up high. Elk hunters know this. They go up there, they get a elk. Elk could be 600 to 800-pound animal, and they got to get the elk out. And after you get past age 30, I think you really need a rook because the elk is it's a lot of work. And there's a lot of elk hunters that use Rokons to, get the game out. Now they can drag it, they can we offer trailers, they wrap it, they gut it, maybe they all have different techniques. Some even carry it right on the bike. but whatever, they use a Rokon. So, recreation there's other parts of recreation, like people searching for old gold mines and all kinds of different things, but the primary thing is, I think, mostly big game hunting in states like Montana, Colorado, Utah, Alaska, Washington State, and in various places where, they can go. Um, then the next market would be, agriculture, and there's a lot of different uses, for that, mostly, for example, if you have a center pivot irrigation system, it's a giant one and you're in a giant field and you don't wanna tear up the terrain and you wanna bring this little bike out to your center pivot, and you can actually mount it on your center pivot, drive that around, and then at the end of the day, you can ride back to your home on a Rokon. It's better than a four-wheeler. It's just easier. That's an example, but if a row crop, you're at a row crop and you wanna do crop checking, like corn or something, and it's a row is 31 inches wide,
Right.
only a Rokon can fit down the row crop, so if you have to get down a row crop, a Rokon's pretty handy. Yeah, there's a lot of other applications in agriculture. We've even have some accessories where we can plow and use a York rake or a cultivator and all these things, but there's a lot of things in agriculture. Plus, they can write it off. So that's another good market. And the third market um, would be military. Now, we have had military sales in different countries, um, had a huge success in the Middle East and Jordan. I got a call one day many years ago. It was like, I think it was 2002. And this gentleman from England said, HM likes your product. I go, I don't know what he's talking about. That's another thing in business. Robert Corpy said, open your mail, answer your phone. I believe in that.
Right.
He had some basic things to say that stuck with me through the years. He was a real motivator. But open your mail, answer your phone. So I answer the phone, and this guy says, HM really likes you. He had an English accent. I could tell he's calling from overseas. I had no idea where. And he'd like you to come over this weekend. And I'm going, where would I be going? Oh, to Jordan. We have a trade show. We'd like you to be there. And it's a Wednesday. And I didn't even realize I vaguely knew where the Middle East was. I mean, I knew where the Middle East was. I vaguely knew Jordan was in the Middle East. This is pre-internet,
Yeah,
really.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so, but we had this trade center we were at Pease at the time at the air base, and the state of New Hampshire, thank you again, state of New Hampshire, had built a trade center, and they had Exim Bank, the Department of Commerce, and New Hampshire's own trade group, all under one roof. It right near where I was working, because I wanted to be at Pease because of the trade center too. That's another reason we went to Pease, because I knew the trade center was gonna be there. And I went right over there, and they printed off all this stuff on the Hashemite kingdom, and that King Abdullah was the 43rd direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. I read all the stuff on the plane. I bought a ticket. I had no
Oh,
idea what
god.
I was walking into, but I was young. I never willing to take on, these things. So I fly over there, jet lagged, fly through London, get to Amman, get picked up by this colonel and his sergeant, and they take me to the Amman Marriott. They take care of all the expenses for when I land. And then the next morning at the crack of dawn, they pick me up and take me to this military airport where the show was gonna be. I didn't really know there was a show. I didn't, like, have a brochure. It wasn't on the internet,
You couldn't
so it
Google
like
it, yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like I had no idea what was going. But what the king was doing, he started the first, uh, show called SOFEX. It was the very first one, SOFEX, and it was his idea to bring all special forces operators from the Middle East together. He had been prior to King Hussein naming him as king, he had been the head of, special forces for Jordan.
Mhm.
So, I arrived there at this base early in the morning. It's the first time I'd seen 80-foot pictures of a human being leaning against a hangar. There was the king in military regalia and the king in a business suit. That was the biggest picture I'd ever seen of a human being in my life. It was amazing. And I didn't know where. He dropped me off. They don't tell me where to go. And I go, I guess I'm gonna go in that hangar because all the other different setups all around the base. And so I go in the hangar and there was a coffee bar in the middle. And I figured, okay, I'll go over there. And they had tanks, personnel carriers, all this military equipment. And off in the corner, blew my mind. There was a Rokon. I go, I don't even know how they got one. So they have a Rokon. And it's a relatively new one. So I go over there and I stand next to them with my coffee, and
It's
I
the
don't know
most
what's
bizarre
going
trade
on.
show in the world.
I don't know what's going on. And I see this guy who became one of my dear friends. He was a major at the time. Um, and he was next to his stand, which was a Jeep, which he had modified tremendously for military operations. So we're just chatting a little bit, and because we're just getting to know each other. He doesn't know who I am. I don't know who he is.
Right.
And all of a sudden I hear dun 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 dun, and then these streamers, people jumping out of planes outside the door, and then finally someone goes to the door. Everyone, to your places. I have no idea where my place is. No one's told me anything. So I go and stand next to the Rokon. I felt most comfortable there. And, all of a sudden, there's a big commotion at the door. And, uh, and then the king, I'd seen a picture of him, he pops his head in through the door. It's a pretty big hangar. I mean, you got tanks, everything in there. I'm at 45 degrees from the door. He looks towards my direction, and he starts walking directly towards me. He skips everybody in the hangar. I couldn't believe it. He comes up to me, and now there's 100 people following him. Security, reporters, people with cameras. They circle us. And he acts like he's in New York City on the street, and he walks up to me and goes, "Might you be from Rokon?" Right? I said,
I might be.
"Ah, yes, I'm from Rokon." He says, "I really like your bikes." "Oh, thank you very much." "Can you make them go faster?" "Absolutely." And there were a lot of pictures. He says, "We're gonna do some business," and then that was it. And, uh, we, you know, everybody wanted to meet me after that, like his brother, it was a prince, and I was meeting everybody.
What a
Generals, I met them all.
what a bizarre story.
It was crazy. It was crazy, and then for 10 years, I would go back, and I did several other trade shows. The king, through intermediaries, said to me, "If you don't develop front suspension, we're done." He was the impetus. We had drawings, but you need impetus and to really ignite things.
Right, right.
And so,
And when
you
the
know,
king tells you to do it, my friend,
oh, we went to work on that.
you just
Yeah,
do it.
yeah. Then it was because of King Abdullah that we went to work on that one. And so I was so proud when I came back with a working front suspension bike, and brought that back to Jordan. And then that's when they loved it. So there was so many memories in Jordan. I think the Jordanians are some of the nicest people on the planet. They're very giving. They have some of the most incredible food. So much history in the Wadi Rum that they took me to, and to you know uh, Mount Nebo, and and obviously Petra. Petra is amazing,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
everyone should go visit Petra. It's truly one of the 7 wonders of the world, and the Jordanians are the most hospitable people on the planet. I love them.
And if you own a Rokon and you appreciate your front suspension,
Absolutely.
know
Yep.
where it came from.
Yep.
Tom, this has been really brilliant. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate you taking us through Rokon. And of course, if anyone is interested, and I hope they are, to at least check them out. And they come in multiple colors. I can't say that for every brand. Rokon.com. Thank you again for listening to the Lowdown radio show, which is, of course, presented by advrider.com.